This is a CNIB Lake Joe at Home program. CNIB Lake Joe at Home logo, image description, an illustration of a marshmallow roasting in a campfire with a roof in the background.
Thank you everyone for taking an interest in listening to me. I'm actually in Windsor, Nova Scotia, which is almost an hour west of Halifax. This is where I live, and this is where these days I work almost every day, especially in the last month or two where we've been in lockdown and we've been told to stay home or at least stay in our own communities. Things are loosening up now, and we're looking forward to summer. And maybe later on we can get into the way the pandemic has changed the workflow for us. And I'd also be interested in hearing from any of you about how it's changed things for you in your lives. If there's any problems with hearing me or with my video, let me know, and I'll do what I can. I'm just hoping that everything holds up okay. Most of my Zoom calls are interviews for television news reports, and most of those interviews are only 10 or 15 minutes long, because typically we have the luxury of researching beforehand and having touched base with the person we're interviewing and having a pretty good idea of what we want to talk about and how we want to go about it and the kind of things we'll talk about. So that means the interviews are not overly long. So how my laptop likes a Zoom session of this length, we'll find out. So I am a news reporter with Global News. It was interesting to hear you say digital journalist, Sherry, because I keep forgetting the digital part. I've been doing this so long that when I started, there was no digital. I'm the East Coast correspondent for Global National Television, which is a newscast based in Vancouver, broadcasts across Canada at supper time. I started doing this kind of work in 1984 at a radio station in Charlottetown. That's where I grew up, on Prince Edward Island, mostly in and around Charlottetown. So 37 years I've been doing this, which I can't believe myself at any given time. It's just this incredible collection of moments and days and assignments. And for the past 33 years, I've been working for Global as a court reporter for a couple of years, and then as a political reporter for a couple of years. And then I was an assignment editor. That's the person on the desk, on the phone, you know. I need pictures of that Spider-Man Parker, that guy. So then national correspondent, which I've been doing since 1998. I've covered a wide range of advanced issues: elections, healthcare, hurricanes, other natural disasters, plane crashes, farming, fishing, science, at least to the extent scientific research. There are some great research schools here, Dalhousie included. I've had the privilege / responsibility of traveling all over Atlantic Canada and beyond, trying to reflect our region to people in other parts of Canada and other parts of the world increasingly, because it's so easy to access news from anywhere now. So my job, if I'm characterizing it accurately, is to identify things we want to report or tell people about, research the issue or the situation that we're interested in, arrange to speak with people who are involved in that, arrange to collect visuals, video footage, arrange travel details when required, consider the questions to ask the questions, write a script, including instructions, time codes, and et cetera, for what goes where in our final report. Record a voiceover, make sure people's names and titles are accurate for the screen, coordinate with a producer or boss what the final script will look like, and then coordinate and oversee the editing of the final report. So it's a lot of little things. On a good day, those things kind of flow seamlessly into each other, and some days they don't. Some days there's a lot of seams, a lot of things between each step, and on other days stuff happens where you might start something and you never do get to finish it, at least not on that day. Um, I have the luxury compared to, I think, a lot of reporters with local television stations in various parts of North America, we'll say, who tend to file reports for their newscast that night because something is happening, like a government news conference or something. Whereas I'm pretty lucky because I go to my boss and I say, well, this is what it is. And they say, well, that's interesting in Halifax, but is it interesting to so-and-so in Saskatchewan or in Vancouver or Barrie or whatever? It needs to be something, that people all over the country would want to watch or hear or take an interest in or, ought to be made aware of. So there are times when I get extra time. It's not extra time, but sometimes I get more than a day to look into something that we think, could be something of that magnitude or something interesting. Other times it's just some quirky story that's just kind of neat. And so I get to tell that story too. I work with a camera operator. His name is Gray, who also edits our reports. And he's top notch at what he does. He's been doing this almost as long as me, and is extremely reliable, talented. And like me, he's had to adapt and adjust to the changes in technology over the decades. We'll get into that too, maybe, hopefully, a little later. So probably my favorite part of the job is being like a witness to history, getting to see things up close. It's a front row seat, even though it can be heavy emotionally sometimes, even physically. If you're traveling a lot and you're working really long days in somewhat stressful situations, and the challenge of distilling, like condensing and presenting things to people in a way they can understand and hopefully appreciate what it is in some way. I really love that. Sometimes it's really hard to feel like you've done it properly, but that's, I think, what, like any job, I think that's what keeps us doing it, is trying to get better at what you do, right? Because you never feel like you've mastered anything or that you've got everything figured out. Probably the most fascinating places I've been to cover news are Haiti, which was after the earthquake in 2010, and Afghanistan, where we visited twice in the spring of 2006 and 2007. Obviously, those places are a long way from Atlantic Canada, so why was I there? Well, Afghanistan came up in, I guess it was April of 2006, because Canada had just stepped up to take command of the Kandahar district of Afghanistan. And this was, a series of events after 9/11, where Canada, the US, and others went in to try to find bin Laden. Couldn't find him. And then it became, at least the way it was presented, it became, well, we're going to make a difference for these people and change the lives for the better and train their police and army so they can take care of themselves and fend off the Taliban. So Canada just took over in January, I think, or February of 2006. And so we're developing a rotation of crews to go in there for X number of weeks at a time. And, if you think about a continual rotation, that's a lot of people. So they had 2 crews in there and they didn't have a third. So they asked us if we were interested. I said I was, because I'd always been interested in that sort of assignment. I think most reporters, somewhere in their mind or in their heart, have thought about the possibility of being in those situations, like reporting from war zones. And On the other hand, we had a young family, so it was a tricky decision. Not to mention the danger that was there because you're going into a war. So I talked about it with my wife, and she knew all of this stuff that it is something I would have wanted to do professionally. So she supported me, which meant a lot. So then we had to sort out how we were going to get there, when we were going to go. We didn't have a lot of notice, to be honest. I believe we were asked on a Wednesday and we were flying out the following Monday or Tuesday. Extremely short notice. So we had a lot of scurrying to do with visa, passport, getting the right clothing, equipment, that kind of thing. So it all worked out. We flew to Dubai on the way there, the United Arab Emirates, and we just had an overnight at a hotel. And then we went to Kabul, which is a little more north in Afghanistan. They even get snow there sometimes. And we stayed there for a few days. And that was our first sort of culture shock. Kid from small town Maritimes is suddenly dropped into one of the most dangerous places on the planet. So that was really interesting. They always pair us with, I don't know if any of you have heard the term fixer, but they always pair us with these people called fixers, who are people who live in those communities who have expertise in taking care of visiting journalists, basically. So these people know who everyone is. They know how to keep you safe. Typically, they have someone who can drive you. Some of them are even journalists. The guy we had in Kandahar, which is where we ended up, he was a journalist too, a good one. And he courted a lot of danger. At times courted more danger than we did in developing and generating and even shooting some stories that we ended up putting together. Others we did ourselves. So, we're walking through Kabul, and it's burqas and it's poverty everywhere. It's piles of wrecked vehicles and hot, dusty conditions. And it was a lot to take in all at once. And then a few days after that, we're in Kandahar on the gigantic base. It was called the Kandahar Airfield. We're there with, many thousands of soldiers. I think about 2,000 Canadian soldiers at any given time. They put us in a tent with a cot, and you bring a pillow if you want. I ended up sleeping on a rolled up towel my entire time. So which was fine. The thing about the heat and the, I guess, the fairly high level of functioning is that at the end of the day, you're typically pretty tired. But all the water you can drink and all the food you can eat, that was good. The what we would call a mess, or they call it a DFAC, dining facility, was open all the time. And you could have your pick of the US DFAC or the UK DFAC, and there were differences in the sort of menus and the standard of food. But you didn't keep much weight on because you were sweating so much out with the heat and the activity. You're wearing flak jackets and helmets and things like that. So I found that it was a combination of extremes when we were there. Our first time we were there almost a month. And then in 2007, we were there almost 2 months. Obviously, the second time was more of a grind, more moments of sitting there going, okay, when is this over? When can we go home? But also moments that stay with you, that you don't forget. But every day you had choices, right? If you went out with the soldiers on patrols, then you were in a convoy of jeeps and whatnot and tanks, and you could run the risk of having your convoy blown up by a roadside bomb before you knew it hit you. And then if you decided to go out with your fixer, the person who was there to take care of you and help you and even help generate stories with you and keep you safe, you ran the risk of running into the Taliban or someone who didn't like you or being taken captive, which happened to some journalists who were there. So it was a memorable time. The heat, mid to high 40s at times, but also the incredible cooling because it's a desert, and every evening the temperature would go down. It would just plummet. It seemed like in an hour or two, and all of a sudden it was just unbelievably beautiful and cool, and starlit nights. You didn't want to get caught in a sandstorm. I don't know if you've heard of sandstorms, but when the wind comes up and it kicks up the sand, it's unbelievable. You can't see anything. You just try to cover your eyes as best you can and hope you can still breathe and cover your mouth. The sandstorms there are legendary. My favorite night in Afghanistan was probably the second tour we had there in 2007. I was out by myself recording my own video and interviews with a group of soldiers who had lost 6 of their buddies to a bomb the previous week, I guess, or a couple of weeks earlier. And I really wanted to go out with them because I'd interviewed some of them after that happened. And so I got to go out with them on their first trip back outside the wire, as they call it, outside the base. So their first patrols back out. And I got to spend 2 nights with them. Slept on the desert floor with that unforgettable starlit sky and absolute quiet, which is always pretty cool in a war zone. Soldiers teasing me about these camel spiders. You should look that up. CAMEL, camel spiders. If you don't like spiders, don't look it up. But they're these really large spiders. And they're teasing me about how they heard there were a lot of these spiders around. So that was funny in hindsight. It kept me up for a little while. And then I just finally went to sleep. The trip to Haiti was after the earthquake, 2010, spent a week and a half there. It was dangerous as well, but it was safer than Afghanistan. And we didn't encounter any hostility, although we saw lots of hostility. We saw some amazing things like aid agencies dropping these gigantic bags of rice to people so they could eat. People in these camps who had no homes anymore, who hadn't had a proper meal. So to see the joy in their faces was amazing. Talk to them about that. But we also saw people fighting over scraps of metal from the rubble of these places, which they would collect and sell so they could buy food and try to take care of the families. So we covered all of that. Never got threatened or I think most people realized that we were a positive presence there because we were there to tell the world about what had happened. And most people were obviously looking for help for their country. We had a cool assignment there. We followed these Canadian firefighters under the rubble of one of these homes so they could remove the body of this elderly woman to fly her back to her family in Montreal. That was incredible. And being able to sort of put a spotlight on some of the great things that people do was interesting. We had good hosts. We were staying just outside the capital's Port-au-Prince, and we stayed in this place called Pétionville, which is just outside Port-au-Prince, with sort of an upper class, I guess you'd say, family. They had a compound there with sort of barbed wire above their concrete fences for security. Yeah, had a couple good nights with them over some good food and some local rum that helped us relax. That was a good situation. So those are some of the things that I've been able to do, and I'm really glad that I got to do them, even though they are kind of heavy sometimes. I think I mentioned the pandemic changing the way we work. So I'm at home most days, especially recently. In the last month, 2 months, continuously I've been home because of the lockdown. So I think I'm sure you've all noticed this, that when you're in that sort of zone, it's kind of timelessness. Every day kind of feels the same. What did you do on the weekend? I don't know. Pretty much the same thing I did every day of the week. But that is loosening up, and the numbers are down as they are in Ontario and most parts of Canada. I guess all parts of Canada, really. Some like Manitoba was having an awful time too, and Alberta, but I think the third wave is receding and vaccinations are up. So one of the things I do every day, if I'm working or not, is I check the vaccination rate, and I bore everyone with my over-examination of the percentages and my projections. Okay, well, at this rate, by the weekend, we'll be at 60, et cetera. Because those are the thresholds for the reopening in Nova Scotia, at least. How has news changed since I started is something that I guess the longer I do this and the closer I get to potentially retiring, the more I think about the way that news has changed, and the technology. It's just incredible. When I started, you learned to type on a manual typewriter, and you typed out your news stories for the radio station I worked at in triplicate with carbon paper between the pages. I don't know if anyone even uses carbon paper anymore, or if anyone even knows what it is anymore, but that's what we did. And you had to bang that key on the typewriter extra hard to make sure that the back copy through the carbon paper got the impression of the ink. Telex machines all over the place, like noise all over the newsroom. Telex machines, our broadcast radio network service, the radio would be on to see what the other radio stations were doing to make sure that you didn't miss anything. Newsrooms, frankly, were clouds of smoke, at least the one I was in, because more people smoked in those days. And this sort of continual clatter of noise. And then things changed to word processors around the, I guess, late 80s. Sorry for going back so far. And then computers, and things became much quieter. I remember when I walked into the first TV newsroom that I really worked in 1990 in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. I was really thrown out of whack by how quiet it was, because there were none of those things that I was used to hearing. And it actually unsettled me how quiet it was. I'm still not sure I'm used to that, but we look at some of the recent changes like social media, which adds another dimension to how we work. The pros, I guess. This is not scientific, it's just my observations. But you can move information faster than you ever could to more people than ever before. So if something happens, you as a news consumer find out about it more quickly on more platforms than ever, right? So radio, website, television, the cons, at times, I've noticed that information can move so fast, and that there are so many people moving it so fast that there's not sometimes as much time taken to consider or kind of deliberate over what the information is, what it means, what's the context of this. Maybe because I'm older, I always go to, what does that mean? Like, that's really interesting what you just said or reported, but what does it mean? And so if I can, I like to take time to figure that out before I tell other people about it. And then they can decide what it means as well. But sometimes the context can be provided the first time through. The challenge with trying to take the time to do that is that can slow me down. And because of these new technologies, we're sometimes responsible for moving information to more platforms, sometimes in the same day, TV, website, Twitter, radio. So it can be a bit of I don't know, a paradox or a struggle to try to keep what you think is a standard of deliberation or news or context, and preserve the time to think about how you want to do what you want to do or need to do, and that you've got to get it out there to all of these platforms. And you can sometimes overcome that just by copy and paste. I don't like to do that. I like to, as much as I can, try to be somewhat original in the way I present or write things, at least in various versions. There's some other considerations that are interesting in terms of how delicate the job can be at times. Over the years, a lot of people have wanted me to promote a particular cause. Like, we don't really promote, like, I'm not in the promotion or advertising business per se. We kind of do promote this or that, but not, you've got a business and you think more people should be buying stuff. Okay, good luck with that, but that's not my job to promote your business. It's not necessarily my job to promote your grievance over this, the other thing too. Although if it's, part of a larger issue, that is part of what we do. My hometown is Windsor, as I mentioned, Nova Scotia, and there's pressure at times to report on this or that from people. You might see the hockey rink, or your children's friends, parents at a swim meet or something like that. And it can be tough to explain why I can't really do that, because this or that is not really of national significance, I don't think, or magnitude. Sometimes I can send the information on to the global Halifax people, the local newsroom, and sometimes they can report on it or look into it. That gets tricky too, because I don't want to unduly pressure anyone into doing something just because I said it. They need to judge it on its own merit. Because our job is not to do favors for people. That's not what we're there for. That we're kind of being undermined or allowing ourselves to be undermined if we do that. So you try to do what we do for the right reasons, to inform people about things that, we, in our judgment, we think they should or need to be aware of. There is no hard and fast, this is news, that isn't news. Everything is a judgment call. And I know as news media, we make mistakes and we do things at times for the wrong reasons. Somewhere up the ladder, because there are financial considerations. Our company wants to make money. We're in a business. That has nothing to do with what I think should be on the air. But they need people to watch, and they need website hits and this and that. So part of my job is to say I don't care about that. It's not my job. I'm not here to get hits for your website. I'm not here to lure people into watching. by some trick or you know. But anyway, on the other hand, you do want people to watch what you're doing, because if you think what you've done is worthy, you want people to know it and hopefully get something out of it. But we're not here to get someone's good books or cower to anyone like a politician or business or a bully. We don't accept benefits, so you can't pay me to do this or that for you. Even like silly things, we're not supposed to or allowed to accept any benefits, like even innocuous things. Media can be targeted these days, probably more than ever. That can complicate the job, because some powerful people, as I think we all know, have tried to discredit mainstream media as a way of making it easier to get others to believe their own lies and suit their own agendas. And unfortunately, some people are falling for that. And maybe they've, I don't know, lost some ability to discriminate, because some of these platforms are designed to reflect their own beliefs back to them rather than challenge them. Not to go off on a tangent there, but so we can encounter hostility at the best of times, probably more maybe lately in some situations. But there are some news stories you cover where you will always be accused of favoritism of one side or another, by both sides, which sounds bad. But I think if you ask most reporters, they would say if both sides are unhappy with you, then you did your job well, which is kind of weird. Because I guess it shows that you're not favoring either side. And if the complaint is that you got this wrong or that wrong, then I want to be told that. I want someone to show that to me. I want them to say, when you said this in your report, it was wrong. That's what I want, because it does happen. Even though I'd try my best not to let that happen. What you don't want, it's the same as everyone on this call. What you don't want is to be prejudged because of this or that you must be like this or like that, or have this agenda or that agenda. So those are some of the interesting things about my job. I think we're getting toward the end of my rambling here, but situations that we found ourselves in, because we move all of our information over the internet now. There was a time when we used telephone lines, and in whatever city we were in, we would need to run down the sidewalk at times if we were close to our deadline with our big bulky metal tape machines, and then knock on the door and hope that the telephone office guy got the message that he had to stay late on overtime to let us in and show us where to plug in our equipment to send our stories out. Those were the old days, which was kind of fun and kind of scary. And now we can move information like our reports over the internet. One of the things we've tried to do is find a hotel that has good upload and download speed. It's not always possible. There was a time in remote Newfoundland and Labrador where there was this, I don't know if you remember, there was this die-off of blue whales, the incredible blue whales. And it was a remote area of Newfoundland, and the internet was just awful. But they sent us there. And again, it was one of those incredible stories to be able to cover. The smell of a blue whale carcass, I would not recommend. And not a surprise, I guess. But they brought a carcass ashore for a necropsy, and then they went on to display the skeleton at the Royal Ontario Museum. Actually, I don't know if it's still there, but a guy named Mark Engstrom, I think his name was, the curator. But anyway, the internet speed from this place we worked from was a bed and breakfast in a place called Trout River, and the upload speed, don't want to get too technical, the upload speed, generally we look for 20, 50, if we're lucky, 75 or 100 megabytes a second, so we can move our stories out quicker. Trout River was 1 to 2 megabytes per second upload. It took us 2 or 3 hours to send out a news story that was 2 minutes long. And we knew it was going to be slow, so we tried to finish it early to make sure that we would make it to our newscast in time, and we barely did. But those are just, in hindsight, those are just stories. And after a while, you realize there's literally nothing you can do about it. You do your best and you try to account for it, or be provisional. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Anyway, I think that's my tale.
To learn more about CNIB Lake Joe at-home programs, visit CNIBLakeJoe.ca.